What's the first thing you think of when you hear of a police shooting?
Racism, I guess. Racism.
Again. Yeah, that's it.
And how does it make you feel when you hear about it?
Angry, upset, or powerless.
Anger, pain, hurt, confusion.
Compassion.
Do you think there's anything that could change the occurrence of these shootings?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is a conversation. A conversation between both parties and I think in the world in general.
I have no idea what could change it other than a complete systemic overhaul, and I have no idea what that looks like at all.
I'm Susan Springer Anderson, the artist behind the public art project Ashes and Stains. The project came about in response to the events of the summer of 2016. It was a summer full of violence. It seemed that like week after week, and sometimes only days apart, there were stories of new violence. In total, between June and August, 300 people were killed by police, and 27 officers lost their lives. On July 6, 2016, Philando Castile was shot and killed. His girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter witnessed the shooting. The next morning, when I read that story, I was wrecked. I was angry. But then, only a few hours later, 5 officers were gunned down in Dallas in what seemed to be a retribution attack. On that day, it seemed that there was no end in sight for this violence, and it was a cycle that was just going to keep repeating itself. I was dismayed, as many were. But the thought that kept coming to mind was unless we let these stories truly sink in, and we actually mourn these deaths, we'll become numb to them and accept them just as the way things are. I was not ready to accept that. And so the following day, the idea for this project started to develop. The grief felt by the families and communities that have lost loved ones is expansive. And as a nation, this grief is wedging a divide between us, choking us alive. It's time to truly mourn these events. Ashes and Stains is an opportunity to embody this idea. The project combines the cultural and biblical practices of sackcloth and ashes, which symbolizes mourning and repentance, and weaves in a contemporary interactive art process. At each site, participants will sign up for a time slot, and during their time, they will take part in preparing fabric banners to be dyed, plunging their fabric into the dye bath multiple times to set the color, then unbinding, rinsing, and hanging the banners to dry. Participants will then move on to the next station, where they will utilize a dyed banner that has already been dried, and first on a separate piece, practice writing 7 names of either civilians killed by police or police killed by civilians, and then move on to finally recording those names in charcoal ashes on the actual banner. The 2 groups of names are intermingled, and there is no distinction made between them. Although I fully encourage people to look up their list of names after the event, while they're at the project site, I ask people to focus not on the details of the event, but on the person, the loss of life, the loss of trust and stability that ensued because of their death. The names of those being recorded come from 2 sources, and the project specifically focuses on people that have been killed since 2013, which is really when the most accurate lists started to be kept. The stories and biographies for those being recorded can be found on 2 websites, Officer Down Memorial page, odmp.org, and killedbypolice.net. Between those 2 sources, there are about 5,000 names to record, and we have about 700 banners to make. Now, clearly the writing of names on fabric will not change anything. But the hope is that by dwelling on these names at the project site and taking these 7 names away that each participant will be responsible for, 2 things will happen. The first is an outward movement, as we actively pray for families and communities that have acutely felt the aftermath of this violence, that will start to actually petition on behalf of these people, projecting an outward care for them, for people that we don't know. The second is more of an inward process. As we spend time with these names, we can search our own hearts for ways that we might be unconsciously contributing to this violence, whether that's through opinions or interactions with other people, or our silence. We can prepare our hearts to be listening and to have the much more difficult conversation about how to enact change. I hope you'll join me on this journey of ashes and stains as we seek to move past being overwhelmed and offended to empathetic and effective.